Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall was released for free by Bethesda some time ago. I'll have download links below. Also, check the video description for timecode links for each of the steps of this new player guide to skip around the video quickly. You'll probably want to use this because I'm going to be going into exhaustive detail. Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall is an action RPG that I feel is in an entirely separate category from Morrowind Oblivion or Skyrim, as it is less a hand-tuned sandbox and more a large, open-ended fantasy life simulator that relies on your imagination and suspension of disbelief, much like a tabletop RPG does. Daggerfall takes place in the Iliac Bay region of Tamriel between High Rock and Hammerfell, with a real-world space estimated to be the size of Great Britain. There are 3 main kingdoms, Daggerfall, Sentinel, and Wayrest, with an ever-present status of unrest, featuring a backdrop of a series of wars and skirmishes for control of various territories. The Empire has lost control of the region as the provinces fight amongst themselves, and although you are sent to the Iliac Bay to discover why the former king of Daggerfall has risen as an immortal, unstoppable ghost commanding a spectral army crying for revenge, you will, not too far into the main quest, realize that amongst all of that, the 3 kingdoms are seeking a long-lost super weapon Tiber Septim himself used to gain dominion over Tamriel, and they want to use it for their own ends. In addition to those 3 kingdoms, the Orcs of Orsinium, the King of Worms, ruler of the Necromancers, and the Underking, an ancient force from long ago, as well as the Imperial Blades, all seek the weapon. If you decide to pursue this main quest, this is what you'll be dealing with, acting as a double and even triple agent, betraying one kingdom for another time and time again, each for a piece of information. You will need to make your choice and decide who will rule the Iliac Bay. Unless, of course, you decide to ignore the main quest, which most people do. You see, there are well over 30 other kingdoms that all have relationships with the big 3. And in each of those kingdoms, there are a myriad of political factions with ever-changing relationships. Although the kingdoms have starting reputations with one another, which are pretty standardized, they will shift radically as you play, as a background simulation occurs. You, the player, do not see these events happen. Rather, you'll hear about them in town gossip, as one faction member will insult another and they'll become openly hostile. 2 factions will forge an alliance, as one pays a peace fee to the other. You, the player, are not the center of the world. The world continues despite you, and you will find that being an honored member of the Order of the Candle one day puts you in favor with the kingdom of Yakalon's nobility. But then you'll go to the tavern afterward and discover that the bards now hate you due to a political disagreement with the knights, whom you are a member. You can become an honored hero, favored by peasants and the rich. Merchants may love you, and you may find yourself wealthy. But in your pursuit of heroism, you did some quests that put you in bad with the Dark Brotherhood. Little did you know that the Dark Brotherhood, deal in death, actually had an alliance with the Order of Arkay, the god of life and death. And you had no idea that the kingdom you were in had Arkay as its patron deity. So now the nobles hate you. The royalty won't give you the time of day. But one region over, they don't like Arkay very much. And now you're getting favorable responses from both the peasants and the nobles alike. You try to join the Fighters Guild only to realize you aren't good enough with weapons to be considered for membership. Or maybe you're good with weapons, but you didn't have the magic skills the Mages Guild were looking for, so they rejected your request to join them. After working very hard, you do both the Fighters Guild and the Mages Guild quests, but then doing one particular Fighters Guild quest, end up killing a mage, member of the Mages Guild, and your reputation drops below a certain level, and you're expelled from the Mages Guild. Although you discover you can do quests for the local Mages Guild leader, which gives you enough reputation for them to give you a second chance. And you don't screw up this time. You master both guilds. You decide, I'm going to buy a house and settle down. And as you're accumulating the wealth to buy that house, you realize someone has framed you for the theft of a gem, turning the peasantry against you. In amongst this, you make a mistake and you kill a peasant. You are taken to court, and using your speech kill, you're able to lie to the court, and you are found not guilty. And now the legal faction has a chip on their shoulder, and the town guards want to arrest you for criminal conspiracy, making fake charges up. You realize it may be better to leave the kingdom for a year or two and let them forget you, which does happen over time. Or you might power through despite the fact you're clearly not welcome there. But since the nobles like you, and you don't mind getting your hands dirty, you end up smuggling drugs. And as a result of your actions, they like you. And your legal reputation actually improves. The next time you come back to the region, your reputation has improved. And you decide maybe I am going to settle down. You buy a house there. All of this is possible in Daggerfall. Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall is a very old game, and it shows. Now, I've never been a stickler for graphics. To this day, I will recommend Sanctuary RPG on Steam, and that is just a text-based game. So there's this angel. Her name is The Fallen. And she asks me, "You into penetration? Because I've got a sword with your name on it." I'm gonna reposition. She's preparing to dash. She's dashing now. I'm gonna block it, which I did. No, when I say Daggerfall's age shows, I mean the mechanics and the stability of the game. I do not believe a single game coming out of Bethesda has not been rushed. And probably none as much as Daggerfall. Maybe Battlespire. Or Redguard. But none of the mainline entries. When people ask me what my favorite Elder Scrolls game is, I used to say Morrowind, because Daggerfall was just too buggy to have a consistent experience in. Thankfully, both Daggerfall and Morrowind have fan-created engines that replace the buggy Bethesda engines. So enter the new program we run, Daggerfall Unity. While officially in alpha, Daggerfall Unity is fully playable from beginning to end on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Most bugs in vanilla Daggerfall have been fixed with this new engine. For the most part, issues like falling through the world when climbing a staircase or other issues happen far less, if at all. And even if an issue does come up in Daggerfall, unlike the vanilla game, you can use the command console to fix problems if they occur. The vanilla game didn't have a command console. Now, whereas the vanilla engine had very limited save slots, Daggerfall Unity has no such limitation, allowing you to do what you should always do in a Bethesda game, and save often. Now, you can get a functional version of Daggerfall at Bethesda's official website. I'd recommend against this, however, as it's only the original version, and that's a problem. We'll talk about that soon. Not only that, but it also installs Bethesda.net, meaning if you don't want Bethesda's own special brand of Steam on your PC, well, too bad. Likewise, the original disc version and the Elder Scrolls Anthology versions are not recommended as they are not up to date, just like the official Bethesda version. The best place to get Daggerfall is from the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, that is uesp.net. Grabbing the Daggerfall setup package will give you all the options you need to have a completely patched version of Daggerfall, including all the community fixes. Although most of the patches in that bundle won't actually do much for Daggerfall Unity, it is still the most complete and up-to-date version of the game. Although, Daggerfall setup only works in Windows. If you're running Mac or Linux, you're going to want to go to UESP and grab the dfinstall.zip file instead. If you use this method, you'll have to grab individual patches and fixes and install them yourself manually, however. Now, if for some reason you are crazy or very passionate about accurate archival, you can play vanilla Daggerfall in the vanilla Daggerfall engine via Daggerfall Setup's shortcut, which will run through a specially set up DOSBox automatically. Setting up DOSBox for yourself with Daggerfall is a pain due to it requiring the CD-ROM drive, and you'll have to mount and emulate a fake one. I've gone over that in previous videos, and I don't recommend it to anybody. DOSBox can be run in Windows, Mac, various flavors of Linux, including Debian, and there's even Android versions on the Google Play Store. However, none of these options are recommended to new players. Instead, go to dfworkshop.net, go to the download section, and find the Daggerfall Unity section. Install the Windows, Mac, or Linux build of your choice directly into the Daggerfall folder. You'll notice two types of each build, stable and preview. Stable has been tested by the community and is least likely to have any known bugs or issues, whereas the preview builds are the cutting-edge builds for folks who want the latest version now and don't care about any issues that might come up. The reason these are distributed is so that preview players can report problems to be fixed before the completed fixed version is uploaded as stable later. To almost anyone who just wants to sit down and play without problems, I'd recommend picking up the stable build. For the most part, upgrading to newer versions is as simple as unzipping the newer version and overwriting the files of the older version, at the time of recording this anyway. Once you open up Daggerfall Unity for the first time, it will ask you to locate Daggerfall's files. Once you've done this, the launcher will open properly, and you'll be able to pick from some simple options. Clicking into the advanced side, however, you'll be able to choose from even more options. It's recommended you go over all of them and tune the game to your liking. If you are a stickler for the crunchy pixel look the game used to have, you can turn on retro rendering mode in the video options. Combined with a lower resolution, it will fairly accurately recreate how Daggerfall used to look. Really, just playing with the video options is recommended for most people with low to mid-spec computers figuring out how to optimally run the game. Now, under advanced options, some settings that are important and worth considering are as follows. Under gameplay, you're going to want to look at Start in Dungeon. By default, you do start in Daggerfall in a dungeon called Privateer's Hold, a rather simple dungeon that a lot of people tend to get lost in. I will do a quick walkthrough on Privateer's Hold later in the video, explaining how to get out of it as quickly as possible. Some people prefer to skip the starting dungeon or use mods to randomize the starting dungeon location. My personal suggestion is to start in the dungeon, as skipping it deprives you of many potential money and item sources that you can sell when you reach the first town. If you skip the starting dungeon, you're going to have to work with very limited money and items. Next, under enhancements, the advanced climbing system allows you to climb around corners and do things that the vanilla game just wouldn't allow. But realistically, your character should be able to do with sufficient climbing skill. The enhanced enemy AI will allow enemies to transcend the old walk against walls forever of the original game and actually allow them to kind of move back and forth in an attempt to get around or over smaller objects and try to get to you. Now, enemy infighting, it looks cool, making enemies of different factions fight each other instead of working together against the player. If you're looking for an easier game, turn it on. If you're looking for a harder game, turn it off. Next up is allow magic item repairs. This is an interesting beast because it was actually part of an INI file with the original vanilla Daggerfall, but was moved into the launcher for Unity. Magic items in Daggerfall are somewhat overpowered because unlike normal spells, they don't take magic points from you. Instead, they damage the magic item slightly until it breaks and vanishes from your inventory. This allows you to have huge pools of magic items just willy-nilly casting things, and if you can repair them, well, you can use them infinitely. I love magic items in Daggerfall, but I also think the game was balanced around you losing and finding new magic items. Allowing them to be repaired simply destroys that gameplay loop. Again, turn this on if you want the game to be easier, turn it off if you want the game to be harder. You'll find, in general, you'll have more to do looking for those ideal magic items if you can't just repair them. Next up is instant repair services. It's another gameplay loop destroying function. Ideally, in the vanilla game, You'd want to store an extra set of gear or two in your wagon, in your player home, or on your ship, allowing you to swap out gear while you repair the old gear. Because by default, it takes time. It might take a single day, it might take several days depending on the piece of armor. So if you want the game to be far easier and you don't want to have to think about managing multiple sets of gear, then this is a good function for simplifying the game quite a bit. Otherwise, it will take several days to repair high-end gear. And the game by default supports this by encouraging you to have multiple sets of gear. Next up, we got Guild Quest Selection. This is actually recommended for new players and recommended to be turned off for veteran players. This option will allow you to pick which quest you want when you request a quest from a faction. It pops up with a list of all applicable quests that you are able to acquire at your current rank, and that list gets longer as your rank goes up. While this is great for avoiding potentially catastrophic quests that you simply don't want to do again, or you tried and you realized just didn't fit you, it does cultivate a mentality where you just repeat the easiest quest over and over until you've maxed out your reputation. Once you get a feeling for the different quests and what they're like, you should actually turn this feature off, as it forces you occasionally out of your comfort zone, and you can turn those quests down still, and without any penalty at all. For new players, turn it on while getting used to the game, and when you're more comfortable, turn it off. That's my opinion. Now, there are tons of other options, and I recommend going over all of them, but these that I listed are the important ones that actually affect how the game is played. When starting up the game for the first time, it's going to prompt you to choose where you came from. Imperials and Orcs are not a valid choice. However, any other race is fine to play as. And you can be successful throughout the game using any race in any role. However, knowing what the racial bonuses are make the game much easier. There are mods that change what the racials do, but we'll be ignoring them for this section, and we'll go over what best to pick with Daggerfall Unity unmodded. In the vanilla game, unmodded, High Elves are innately immune to paralyzing magic. This makes them the best race choice in the game by far, at least until you gain reliable access to magic items or potions via the faction system. Until that point, you're most likely going to be getting paralyzed and killed. When paralyzed, you can still drink potions, use items, and cast spells. You just can't move or attack. Spiders and scorpions, vampires, nightblades, sorcerers, and various type of undead and Daedra will also cast a paralysis spell, which your high elf racial will avoid. There are other ways to get this immunity later in character creation, but it costs you nothing to have it just for being a high elf. If you don't want to be a high elf, Bretons are a good second choice because they have a 30% resistance to overall magic. Overall magic does include the paralysis spell, and when combined with high intellect and willpower will make you fairly tanky against enemy spells. You should get that pop-up that says you resisted the spell instead of taking damage. End-game enemies such as Daedra Lords will be a bit easier with this racial, as they tend to sling spells at a distance. If you want to focus on a melee build and want a minor bonus to damage and hit chance, you should be a Red Guard. The bonus is your character level divided by 3. Dark Elves get the same bonus, character level divided by 4. If you want to do archery, then a Wood Elf is going to give you the same bonus as Red Guards, except for ranged combat. The other races are irrelevant, with Nords only having cold resist and Khajiits gaining a bonus to climbing. Finally, Argonians get half fatigue drain while swimming and can hold their breath twice as long. In other words, if you pick one of these races, it'll likely be to role-playing flavor or mod added mechanics, not because they're good, because, well, they aren't. Once you picked your race, you'll be presented with a menu that'll let you choose from a list of classes to play or generate your own class. My personal recommendation is always to choose your class, and then specifically, always scroll down to the bottom and pick custom class. Custom will allow you to make the game as easy or as hard as you want with certain trade-offs. You'll see this menu where you can pick from 3 primary skills, 3 major skills, and 6 minor skills. Skills you do not pick are still usable, but they will start an extremely low level and need to be trained up. You'll notice a dagger in the middle of the screen on average. That is how difficult it is leveling your skills up, and your skills in turn cause you to level up. An overly advantaged character will level more slowly, drawing out the time it takes for your skills to raise, whereas a character judged to be overly disadvantaged will level faster. In the vanilla game, there was a bug that allowed you to take advantages and disadvantages for the same things, like giving yourself a critical weakness to something you were already immune to. I'm looking at you, High Elves. But also, immunity magic was bugged where it didn't cover non-elemental magic like it should have, but rather poison, disease, and paralysis. Before these bugs were fixed, you could have your leveling speeds be fast and be extremely advantaged. But now, these bugs were all corrected in the Unity version, so some of the most powerful game-breaking builds are no longer accessible. It is on this screen, however, that the game will get as easy or as hard as you want it to be. Easy mode in Daggerfall is achieved in 4 main ways. First, pick Longblade, or really a weapon of your choice, but I recommend Longblade. Then Critical Strike and Restoration as your primary skills. In other skills, you should have Mysticism for teleporting and Thaumaturgy for levitation. Second, go to your special advantages and select Immunity to Disease, Paralysis, and Poison. If you're a High Elf, you can skip the paralysis part, as you've already done that, by just being a High Elf. Keep in mind, there are certain enemies like scorpions and spiders that do use a poison-based paralysis. Turn off poison immunity, you may be opening yourself to still getting paralyzed in certain circumstances. In any case, if you're overly confident and allow yourself to be poisoned and paralyzed, I'd still recommend being immune to diseases. Diseases are brutal in Daggerfall to a new character. Once you contract them, they will have a compounding stat debuff based on the type of disease that has no upper limit. In other words, those diseases, most of them, will outright kill you if you've been infected long enough. In the early game, before you gain access to potions, traveling from a dungeon to a religious temple that can cure your disease would be deadly in most circumstances. Sometimes you can just barely make it, but usually you will die upon reaching your destination. So, if you play without immunity to diseases, you want to be extra careful. Make lots of extra saves in case you get put into a no-win situation that ends your character. Later on, you'll just want to keep your wagon stocked with cure disease potions, and it just becomes another level of management at that point. Note that by turning on immunity to disease, you will likely be unable to contract vampirism, which is for the best anyway, since vampirism for a new player in Daggerfall is hell on earth. Sun will kill you, people will hate you, guards will come after you. It's not a good time. On the other hand, lycanthropy is a curse and not affected by immunity to disease. And furthermore, becoming a werewolf or werebore is actually the final step to solidifying the end-game easy mode in Daggerfall. So to recap, immunity to paralysis and poison make the game a lot easier until you gain access to potions of free action. Immunity to disease is recommended for almost all players universally. Now, the third step is, and this is recommended for all players, add 3 times int in spell points, special advantage. Even if you don't want the game to be easy mode, if you ever intend on using magic on that character, 3 times int in spell points should be a staple of that build. It allows you to have enough magic points to actually do whatever you want. Only characters who do not intend on using magic at all should skip this. Once you've finished your advantages, you'll want to balance it out with disadvantages. Adding forbidden weaponry to types other than Longblade is a good place to start. You'll typically only be using the skill you're most trained in, so in this case, long blades. You may want to consider not adding blunt weapons to that list if you intend on using the Wabbajack, or short blades if you intend on getting the Ebony Dagger or Mehrunes Razor. Likewise, if you intend on becoming a werewolf, you may want to leave hand-to-hand off of that list. Customize this forbidden weapon list based on what you plan to do on the character. You may want to look into forbidden armor, leather, and chain, because unless you install a third-party mod, leather and chain are just at the bottom tier of gear, and all materials that are better than leather and chain are plate, and you'll find that iron plate, elven plate, dwarven plate, so on all the way up to Daedric is the main progression of the game. So you really never have a reason to be using leather or chain. Unless, of course, you want to make the game harder by giving yourself forbidden armor plate, which is not recommended for new players at all. Now, one common mistake I see people doing is adding forbidden material Orcish, which is still completely valid and actually something that is good. However, they misunderstand how Orcish works. Because in this game, Orcish is actually a tier between Ebony and Daedric. It is the second most powerful set in the game. It is also the rarest set in the game, so you can add Forbidden Material Orcish, at which point you'll almost never notice, because by the time you're of level to see Orcish, you'll probably be shooting for that Daedric anyway. But Orcish gear is extremely powerful, it's just rare enough to ignore. The reason I say it's a mistake is because some people will very often think it's just a middle tier and that they can skip that middle tier. And in reality, they just barred themselves from the second most powerful set of gear in the game. It's no big deal if you're just going to jump from Ebony to Daedric, however. Either way, once you've balanced out your advantages and disadvantages, you should look at making your max hit points per level as high as you want it to go. As you increase them, your difficulty dagger will rise, but ideally for a tanky character playing on easy mode, you'll probably want it at 30 or 25. It's going to take longer to level up, sure, but you're going to be a lot stronger in the end for it. An important thing to note, however, the reason it says max hit points per level is because it calculates every time you level up how many skill points you get and how many hit points you earn. It's more or less random chance. So you can save before you sleep, and when you sleep, you level up. If you get a bad roll, just reload the game and try again. That's what people typically do. And that's how you play the game on ridiculously twinked easy mode, is you just continually reload until you get a roll you like. Now, it might be tempting to just give yourself disadvantages and get that difficulty dagger all the way down so you level super fast. Something that's important to know, though, other than very quest-specific enemies, if you don't use mods to set persistent dungeons, then by vanilla, dungeons are scaled to your level, meaning that you will encounter enemies based on your level. If you make a very, very weak character that levels very, very fast, you might find yourself not well prepared to fight an ancient lich who shows up very early in the game because you chose to level too quickly. You can really kneecap yourself with that feature. Either way, everything else is up to you, but let me explain the other skill choices I picked here. Climbing and running are things you'll most likely be doing anyway all the time. There's no reason for you not to be earning level progression by doing that. Medical is checked as a way of healing by sleeping, and you'll be sleeping a lot most likely in dungeons. Finally, dodging is interesting. The vanilla skill actually represents your ability to stand in front of an enemy, take a melee swing point blank, and not take damage. Since you'll be physically dodging most strikes, that is, you'll be moving back when the enemy tries to hit you, it won't actually trigger that skill nearly as much as people think it will. However, it does allow you to dip in melee really quick to hit them, and if they get a lucky swing off, well, your dodge skill has a chance to save you from damage anyway. So finishing up on the skills screen, you'll see stats on the sides. You can alter those significantly by reducing certain stats and putting those points into other stats, but My recommendation for new players to keep a balanced build of all 50s in the middle, and figure out what you want to level up as you go. Now, before we move on to deciding your character's backstory, I'm going to rewind a bit. You see, what I explained was how to have an easy, strong character. However, what I'm going to explain now is how to create a broken character, something that just utterly ruins the game's balance forever and makes you a god that honestly can make the game quite boring after not too long. So an alternate way to build for easy mode is to set destruction and restoration as your primary skills, and give yourself the spell absorption advantage. This build, in the beginning, will be quite terrible, and you should probably run past most enemies and get to the Mages Guild. You'll need to acquire about 200 gold or so, and buy the Fireball spell. Once you do that, you will be able to take advantage of a horrible design of spell absorption. You see, the way spell absorption works is as long as you have at least 20 spell points that are spent, that is to say more than 19 points that are empty waiting to be filled, then absorb is active. You have an intelligence plus willpower divided by 2 chance to absorb an enemy spell while it's active. This sounds pretty well balanced because as you level up, you will have a greater and greater opportunity. However, the exception, and this is where the game utterly breaks under its current mechanics, is if you cast the spell yourself, you should, in theory, have a 100% chance to absorb it, since you never fail to affect yourself with your own spells. This exploit allows you to fire point-blank fireballs, ignoring your mana pool because 99% of the time, if all things are equal, you should absorb it right back if the fireball explodes within range of you. This is how you become a virtually unkillable god early on. This does not have the fun of the melee build. It is not balanced. It can complete the game fairly easily, but you lose so much of the game's core essence in doing this. It's straight up breaking the game. And again, the game might become boring as a result. Do note that this is the type of exploit that might get fixed in future updates or most likely mods, so don't always count on it working depending on what kind of loadout you want to bring with mods and everything. Next up, the game will ask you if you want to fast start or choose your character's backstory by answering questions. Always answer the questions on this part, because answering the questions will raise or lower your standing with certain factions. More importantly, it will determine your starting gear. Some races have the ability to get the Ebony Dagger from the Emperor as a gift, and other races and class combos may be given something by their parents or something they saved. If presented with the Ebony Dagger choice, I do recommend it, and High Elves using the builds I've specified should always get it. The reason I recommend it is because it's strong enough to hurt Daedra in cases where lower quality gear like iron or steel or even elven will be unable to hurt those Daedra, forcing you to either run away or adopt an unarmed damage style. Next up, you'll be prompted to select your stats. You can re-roll as many times as you want, and save a roll you like while attempting to get a better one. You should, at the beginning of the game without fail, invest points into either the governing stat of your primary weapon or agility. As your governing stat goes up, your chance to hit goes up. As your agility goes up, your chance to hit also goes up. Specifically, +1 at 60 agility, +2 at 70, +3 at 80, +4 at 90, and +5 at 100. The great thing about archery, short blade, and long blade is they are all agility-based skills, so you can double dip on that hit chance. The other stat to keep in mind is intelligence, because 3 times in spell points advantage, your magic pool will be exactly 3 times whatever that value is. For a spellcaster, that's a mandatory stat you want to max out. Either way, once you've assigned your stats, it'll ask you how fast your reaction time is, aka how fast you want the game to go. This is a holdover from when people really didn't pay attention to games. You'll get a slight bonus to your skill up rate based on how fast you set it to. So, if you want a decent game experience, there's no real point choosing anything below very high, but you can make the game significantly easier by choosing a slower speed. Once you finish the character creation, you get deposited in the starting dungeon privateer's hold. We're going to run this way. So, our goal is in this direction. Like, whoops. Yes, so we go that way. We go up and around and through. You'll notice that there is an imp in this room. You want to avoid it. You don't want to fight it. In fact, we pacified it with the impish skill. That's actually very difficult to do. But we're going to ignore that fact and continue this way. There is an enemy down here who will try to kill you, but we're going to ignore them. Usually they're a good source of loot if you've got a good setup there. There we go. Okay. So we ignore that guy, go over this way. We run up this direction, like this, and then grab that, and just ignore everything. The bat may be a problem on occasion, but we're going to kind of ignore that and head in this way, kind of up and around. And once we get past that, we are going to go there. So we have successfully made it out of the dungeon, unless you checked the box. Otherwise, you'll just be outside where the dungeon normally is. My recommendation from there is to travel to Gothway Garden. It is directly south of where you start the game. Gothway Garden has its own guilds, and it's a great place to get started, no matter what character build you're running from. It may be tempting to visit Daggerfall City right now, but in fact, there is really nothing you can do going directly there. You will find that arriving at Daggerfall City at night will earn you an attack by undead, and arriving there during the day will earn you nothing special, as you must wait for a letter to arrive from the Blades. Keeping in mind, however, that that letter will then give you a limited time in order to respond to it. Once you get the letter, you'll have two choices, either to visit the leader of the Blades in Iliac Bay or don't. If you ignore the leader of the Blades, they will send you a second letter. A couple weeks later, they will throw you out of the Blades and communicate with you no further. However, whether you meet the leader of the Blades and accept your mission or you don't, you can actually continue the main quest by meeting certain criteria to receive other letters from various leaders of the Iliac Bay. You may not have the same breadcrumb trail leading you to where you need to go. However, with sufficient exploration, it is still quite possible to complete the main quest. You just aren't guided there. That simply respects the player's choice to either get thrown out of the Blades or not. Whether you pursue the main quest actively, ignore it completely, or explore and try to complete it on your own without the help of the Blades is entirely up to you. Finally, we've come up to the biggest selling point of Daggerfall Unity, and that's mods. For new players, there are a few mods I actually do recommend. I know some people will say, go into a vanilla experience, play it the way it's meant to be played, and I can respect that point of view. And if you want to adopt that point of view, I won't disparage you for doing so. However, for new players, there are several mods I recommend. However, first I'd like to explain how to install them. Very simply, once you've downloaded a mod, either from the Nexus or from the Daggerfall Workshop forums, you will go into your Daggerfall Unity folder, the Daggerfall Unity Data subfolder, and then the Streaming Assets subfolder. From there, you might put a quest-related mod into quest packs, but more than likely, you'll find most mods will fit into the mods folder as a .df mod. The mods I recommend are as follows. they would be the Archaeologists Guild. The Archaeologist Guild is a whole extra guild added to the game. It includes its own progression. Some of its quests do rival the Mages Guild, so completing them would lower your Mages Guild reputation. Keep that in mind. It becomes apparent when they want you to take the notes from a researcher or something like that. Maybe don't do that. But for the new players, it adds an alternate way to get potions. Normally, you'd have to go through either a Divine Temple or the Dark Brotherhood to get access to potion making. But in this case, a potion maker or a potion seller, you can do straight to the archaeologists. They also have locator devices that you can trade holy relics for, either a holy dagger or a holy tome for, or you earn them naturally through completing various objectives, like doing quests. Like an archaeologist guild quest may give you a locator device, for instance. A locator device places a marker on the target that you are looking for. However, in order to activate a locator device, you have to map out a majority of the dungeon, meaning that you can't just step into a dungeon and instantly know where your target is. You have to explore long enough to have attuned yourself to the dungeon, then you can use the locator device. And this is a way to help players who normally get lost in Daggerfall's dungeons. Archaeologist guild quests that send you into dungeons come with a locator device. However, you can always buy extras as long as you are a member in good standing. The Archaeologist Guild does use speech skills as its qualifier to see if you can join. However, in addition, it also uses lockpicking, because they are basically ascended thieves at times. Next up, I recommend the Daggerfall Unity Quest Pack. It is just more content to do. Very simple. It adds generic quests as well as quests for most of the game's guilds. Finally, these two mods work well together. First, Mountains and Hills changes the terrain of the game from mostly flat to a little more exaggerated with ups and downs. Now, in some areas, you may find, a mountain in the vanilla game, which looks more or less like a pyramid. And with Mountains and Hills, it becomes a true mountain. Things of that nature. The mod is overall very well done. And the one that pairs up well with it is Enhanced Sky, which simply makes the sky a lot better, allows the player to see much further without it appearing odd. In general, the two mods pair together very well. Now, for those who are wondering why my game looks very different from normal Daggerfall or even normal Daggerfall Unity, that's because I'm using the Dream mod, which is a complete texture overhaul. Note that Dream will take up around 4, maybe more gigabytes of RAM, because these are extremely high quality textures. But if you're looking at the game going, that's not how I remember Daggerfall, it's not because of Daggerfall Unity, it's because of the Dream mod for Daggerfall Unity. Just keep in mind that Dream is extremely resource intensive compared to normal Daggerfall Unity. So if you get performance issues, maybe you don't want to run with it. But either way, these are the mods I'd recommend that players start with. And there are tons of other mods to look at and decide for yourself. Some that completely overhaul how combat works, others that add new items and systems like the roleplay and immersion mods. And yes, there are mods that reinstate the Prostitutes Guild that was cut from the game originally, if you are so inclined. For more advanced players, there are 3 mods I'd recommend checking out. The first is Tedious Travel. What it does is it replaces the normal method of fast travel, where you instantly teleport from one destination to another, to a more real-time system, where your character will actually travel through the wilderness. This pairs with those terrain mods I was talking about very well. And by using the control panel at the top, you can actually increase the speed at which the character moves. This will, of course, cause time to pass more quickly, because you aren't actually running faster. The game is more or less just fast forwarding Next up, that pairs wonderfully with tedious travel, is Warm Ashes. Warm Ashes is a mod that creates outdoor encounters to where you will be walking through the wilderness and suddenly you are ambushed by a group of animals or a group of bandits, various other things. You may encounter some friendly NPCs along the road. They're all done by Warm Ashes. At its most extreme, you will actually encounter hostile military forces at a certain keep or castle, and you may inadvertently end up in a one-man dungeon siege. There is a lot possible in Warm Ashes, but it really isn't recommended for new players. However, it is a top-end mod regardless. Finally, by the same author of Warm Ashes, you get Villager Immersion Overhaul, which adds a lot of events that can dynamically take place in cities. It also adds guards to various locations, making thievery a bit harder. If you are a wanted individual, you'll find that getting away with crime is actually far more difficult. And there are just a lot more things that go on in Villager Immersion Overhaul that make the game far more complicated. But it pairs wonderfully with Warm Ashes, again, because it's from the same author. There are many mods I simply haven't gone over here, either due to time or simply unfitting for new players. However, if you want to see many of them in action, you can check out my playthrough that I run on Twitch TV. I have a playlist here on YouTube of the archived live streams that you can check out. I'll have that linked below. And you'll notice that the mod loadout changes over time as Daggerfall Unity modding advances. And I have no doubt that within a year from now, we'll have plenty of new mods. However, Daggerfall Unity, the engine itself, is fully ready to play. So I hope this guide has helped some players get started with the game. It's kind of a bit oppressive for people who've only played, say, Skyrim. And I wouldn't even compare the two games because, again, one is more of a fantasy life simulator, whereas the other is more of a finely tuned sandbox, a handcrafted affair as opposed to a procedurally generated one. But I'm fairly confident in saying that with Daggerfall Unity, Elder Scrolls 2 is my favorite game in the series. Thank you all for watching. Check the links on screen for more content, and I will see you all next time. Okay, that's it. I can't take this lich. Force bolts. The knight died. Holy water, go. Oh, jeez, look at my health. Oh, boy. This is fine. There are no problems here. I am now a mummy. I used up all my bandages. Oh, God, you're shooting me in the back. Okay, that was an ancient lich. The other one was just a normal lich. This is an ancient lich. That explains everything. Okay. This is fine. Get back to the dungeon entrance and put away everything. Warrior is defeated. But yeah, I used 60 bandages on myself. Oh boy.